you were talking about the product, right? The funny thing is with social media, people are the product. We're not the consumer; we're the product. It's the ad companies and the people who are spending money on marketing are spending money to capture our eyes. Yeah,
Man, did you
yeah.
guys, before we jump into that thing, man, but so I took up your recommendation, Chris, and I watched the social media dilemma, right? Um, much of what they, much of the, I don't know how to describe the elementary version of what they said, I conceptually understood.
Yep.
But when they broke that thing down, man, I was like, oh, dang, this
It goes
has the
deep.
potential for some serious societal implications.
I mean, you can really control a large segment of the population with social media, as we've seen in the
Right.
news.
Right. We've seen that 2021, right? We've seen that
Right.
in this last election in the United States. We've seen that we've seen how some nefarious actors have used social media or technology for recruiting, right? We now see how in the United States, the KKK are using the same tactics as ISIS for their recruiting efforts, right? So it's quite interesting.
Well, and it's also whoever has the biggest bank account wins, which is also concerning. It doesn't necessarily have to be used for good or for bad.
But well, yes, absolutely. And you don't even need a big bank account.
That's
You know what
true.
I mean? Facebook ads are cheap.
That's true.
Some of the cheapest in the game.
So here's what, right? Like like lately I've been doing some research into like product management and then like into product management looking at behavioral design. So if y'all get a chance to look at behavioral design, I mean you look at like behavioral design looks at actual behavior of users, right? So
Psychology.
I mean what's the main reason behind if you create a product, you want people to enjoy your product and use your product, right? The more they use it, the more, right? Like you have, the more they use it, right? The better chance you have of, I mean, and here's the thing, right? I think that's the like the trade off right now is because like, these social media companies, do you really want people using your products to the point where it's like a detriment to their lives and people around you? You know what I mean? Because like the engagement part of it is like they design it to constantly be hooked, and it's wild. It's wild because like, I just have, I have this tendency just to like pull up Instagram, just look like, okay, yeah, let me look at this story, look at that, and it's actually cool that Apple, that your iPhone, it shows you like at the end of the week, like what stuff you've been using, right? Because it's like when you realize like, wait a minute, I spent a lot of my time like here, like, you know what I mean? So yeah.
So to your point about behavioral design, right? You just described how you pick up your phone and you go through and you don't even think about it, right? Those behavioral designers, right? Human beings make it such that it's so seamless and part of your everyday that you don't even think about it, right? You wake up in the morning, what's the first thing that you do, right? Many people they hit the phone, right? Because they have to hit snooze, right? They have the alarm on. But then the next thing is, what are the notifications that came over while they were sleeping? All right. And do you go digging once you see those notifications? Do you go and figuring out, who did what to whom on what social media platform or whatever?
Yeah.
Well,
and the crazy,
you were talking about the product, right? The funny thing is with social media, people are the product. we're not the consumer, we're the product. It's the ad companies and the people who are, you know, spending money on marketing are spending money to capture our eyes. And to your point, Ralph, when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you go do, pick up your phone, turn off the snooze button, check social media, and oh, I got a notification. Let me check this real quick. It's almost like a dopamine effect to, you know, you're going to get some type of reward by clicking on that button.
Exactly.
Somebody tags you in a photo, of course you're going to go look at the photo to see, you know, what it is that you've been tagged in. Oh, and
Right.
by the way, you know, throw up a thumbs up or whatever on top of it.
And then that just goes rabbit hole in, right? Sorry, Cal, go ahead.
No. It's funny. I saw in the news today that apparently Facebook is experimenting taking away likes. They're giving users the option to take away likes from their photos because they're thinking that it might have like they piloting it right now to see perhaps it might have like a better effect or a positive effect on youths just because they feel like you know, feeling the peer pressure to have to like a photo or feeling a sense of self-esteem. If you post something and you don't get like 1 million likes for it, you only get 1 or 2. So they're thinking about getting away, you know, giving users the option to get away from to not have to use that button.
Yo,
Didn't
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
No, I was gonna say, didn't Instagram do something similar like maybe 6 months ago? I don't remember if it was likes or it was followers, but they blocked
Uh-huh.
visibility for people surrounding some type of metric as far as
Wow.
that goes.
They did that
And
in a certain region, right? They were testing that same concept out. They
Okay.
didn't roll it out globally, right?
Okay.
got it.
And
Okay.
I think they you know, they ran the experiment, see what it is, and I guess they made a decision because, you know, we still see that those likes and those number of followers today, right? So, but you're right, they did run that 6-9 months ago. It was publicly known as an experiment, but and to your point, Cal, right? So, you know, the research has shown, right? So we are I wouldn't say a unique group, but we are a different group than the generation after us, right? And the generation after them more especially, right? When social media became a thing, you know, we were in college, right? We didn't grow up in it in middle school or high school, right? Those things didn't exist. There was no Google, there was no YouTube, there was no, you know, Facebook, and none of that existed for us. So we had an element of existing without social media and then being able to come into it and kind of figure our way around. We're still affected, right? But now, so come from that framing, and then come from the framing of someone who, as they got into middle school, as they were born, and as they got into middle school, all they know is social media, right? My 8-year-old son, he's talking about social media like he knows what it is, but he's never had any engagement with it. But because he's had engagement with YouTube, which I guess is a social media platform as well, he's talking about things that he hears about it. So all he knows is social media. So to grow up in that environment where, if I post this picture, my values associated with the likes becomes a real challenge, especially in middle school, yo. In middle school, when you're already going through all of those puberty questioning, you know, yourself, why people don't like me, you know, why I can't get no girl and boy, all of that jazz. Trying to figure out all of that world stuff, and then compounded by social media, right? Before, if you had issues at school, they stayed at school because once you left, right? You have to come back and deal with it the next day. Now it's 24/7, 365 days a year. You can't get away from it.
To your point with middle schoolers, we pulled it from my 13-year-old. When I saw the stuff that these kids are on there posting, I'm like, man, y'all are advanced for your age. Like, and advanced not in a good way. And, you know, we saw some things and we were like, nah, no more of that. So we pulled it. And it's funny because she was so addicted to it, she reinstalled the bad boy. So then I had to threaten her. I'm like, yo, if you reinstall this again, we're gonna have a problem. You see that big belt hanging up in the closet? I think that solved the problem. But even then, I'm like, I wonder if she's still finding out a way to get back on social media. Like,
Right.
it's a true addiction. And it definitely is a self-esteem driver as well, to your point, Ralph.
Yeah, the addiction point is really interesting, right?
Hmm.
Because it is, I mean, tying everything that we've said so far. I mean, these designers, um, with bias intent, right? They had a goal in mind, right? Engagement and keeping you on the platform for as long as we can, so we can feed you more stuff. Um, they had a goal in mind, and they kind of figure out how to keep you there, right? Using psychology and what we know um, about the needs of humans, right? And how we can keep them on the platform. There was this one, oh man, there was this one thing, this one quote. Where was it? It was, there are two industries um, that call their consumers users: the illegal drug industry and the social media platforms or the technology platforms,
Wow.
right?
Wow.
Hmm.
When
Yeah.
that was my
Yeah.
response when I heard that quote. And I was like, man, that's a good point. And both industries have the same desire. I need for you to get hooked on this thing so you could
Hmm.
continue to come back for more.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know, and it's funny because that's why like some of those companies, they're so focused on the product, right? Like, because yeah, if you have like some legit product, you don't really have to sell much, you know?
Right.
Like you
Right.
don't have to like come on, like a drug dealer, like you think he out there freaking like convincing people to be like, hey, yeah, come try it, come get this. He may say try it because you could just try it for free, but then that's when boom, you come back and you keep trying, you keep and then you hooked, right?
Give them that
Yeah.
little taste, and that's it.
Right.
Oh
So to
man.
your point, though, Cal, you might not even have considered this, but when you said that, the whole freemium model, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're all talking about how we get engagement, right? How social media's engagement is what keeping us all addicted. That freemium model is that try for free, right? You get in there, you try, and oh, okay, that's cool. Oh, hey, I didn't know Cal was on this platform too. Hey, let me say, hey, what's up, Cal? I'm here too. And then I see some other people, and then I just go down this rabbit hole of using this thing. And now I gotta see what Cal is up to every day.
Not only that, but the amount of data that they collect both inside the social media platform and outside the social media platform is staggering. And we joke about it all the time, but we're having this conversation right now, and I guarantee some type of ad when I hop on the next social media platform will pop up talking about, something that we've discussed here tonight.
Oh yeah,
So the phone is definitely listening to the conversations that are being had and feeding you content based on that, saying, hey, check this out. Hey, check this out. Hey, I noticed you were just talking about having a cheeseburger. McDonald's has a 2-for-1 special right now. Why don't you head over there? Oh, and by the way, we're going to go ahead and plug it into Siri for you, give you the directions. You need an Uber? That's the next ad that's going to roll up. We're going to make sure that, Uber can come pick you up. You'll get your McDonald's, you get home, and then, oh, you got a lady friend over, let me go ahead and suggest a movie for you on top of it. So the convenience factor, especially right now with, we're coming towards the end of the pandemic, hopefully, right? But the convenience factor of being able to keep in touch with people, I think has just driven the user base that much more.
yeah. Oh, for sure, for sure. If you had that window, let's say you were at work, right, and you couldn't engage on your social media for, let's say, 8 hours, or some variations of that, right? That was that much less data that we're collecting. Now that so many people are home as a result of the pandemic, that is just more data to make those suggestions. And your description, Chris, it is absolutely spot on, because that's the same experience I have. It is scary how things kind of start to happen to show up. Example, where weekend before last, we're sitting down with some friends in their yard. We're having a conversation about this fire pit. I forgot what it's called, Stone somebody. This whole fire pit, and we were talking about this a smokeless fire pit. How does that even work? Yada 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 yada. Never heard of this thing before. Never searched for it. Never came up to my social media feeds. Leaving there, right? Our phones weren't on. We weren't on our phones. We weren't talking about it. None of that. I think Daya might have searched for it on her phone so I could see what it was. Wasn't on my phone. Next thing you know, I'm going across Instagram and that fire pit is coming up. Do they know somehow that I'm associated with this woman who has my last name? We share the same last name. We're friends and or we're spouses. Do they know that? And then it just kind of trickles around from there. It's a scary proposition.
So where do you all see this evolving to? And has it gone too far at this point? And I know, there's a lot surrounding governmental restriction around stuff that should be banned on the platform, stuff that shouldn't be banned on the platforms. I think the issue that we get into with that is who makes that call? Because at that point, you're almost playing God at that point. Like, well, I'm going to block this content from the user base, but I'm not going to block this content. But why? I mean, what's the reasoning behind that? And I think there's some obvious ones that should be blocked. So I don't know how this evolves. And I don't know that we are trending the right direction either as a society.
I mean, it's a slippery slope, right? You said, I know which ones should be blocked. You know what I mean? What makes your knowing those to be the right ones, right? So that's the question that comes up.
So I was trying not to throw out any examples, but, any type of violence, where it's, especially involving children, obviously that's a no-brainer. And again, that's my opinion. There may be people that feel differently, but that's a whole separate conversation.
And I think that is the part of the conversation, right? Because that's what such a challenge is, right? We have an entity, technology companies, who are not regulated, like telephone companies are regulated, or other means of communication and that whole industry, right? Technology companies don't have similar regulations, if you would, and as a result, we don't have precedents for some of these things that, especially like as we experienced dramatically so in 2020, 2021, certainly fake news.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We were just talking about earlier around how the algorithm feeds you what you've searched for in the past and perpetuates that line of thinking. Mm-hmm. Right? So earlier on we were talking about the people who think about being are not supportive of vaccines. Right, so the non-vaccinators or whatever the term is.
Anti-vaxxers.
Thank you, anti-vaxxers. That's, I couldn't come up with it.
Chris, you knew that after you were just like ready to just drop that, man. It's like, y'all know.
I saw a social media ad about it real quick before we hopped up.
Man.
So you have your anti-vaxxers, right? And there are social media groups about them that could be considered a class of conspiracy. So if I really wanted to run conspiracy or push a conspiracy idea, then I can easily run a Facebook ad for $25, reach 600 people who fall within that category of people who follow anti-vaxxers, and push other conspiracy theories to that genre of people, right? And then once they start to feed that, right, it the algorithm kicks in because they clicked on it or they watched it for more than 5 seconds, the ad for more than 5 seconds, and then it just runs and it takes a life of its own.
So you know what? When I hear what you said, people, algorithm, technology, and I wonder if this is the same discussion when people talk about gun control, right? Because it's like gun control, technology control, like, these things are tools, right? So then when you look at it from another angle, it's like, okay, wait, is it really the algorithm and the technology companies we need to be pointing the finger at? Or is it how people are using it, right? Because you think about like how Facebook, the intention of it before was, hey, I want to see if Ralph is taking, this class. I want to know what Chris throwing a party for, like, Friday or Saturday. I want to see where the latest party's at, right? And then they open it up to the public.
Yeah,
and when they did, it's just like people just found some crazy fucking ways it's just like people just find ways to just fuck shit up. I don't
Pandora's
know.
box. Literally open Pandora's box.
Right. So it's almost like, okay, well, and then naturally, like, our brains like shortcuts, right? Like the way our brains are designed. So we don't want we don't want to have to take too long to think about stuff, because that just takes way more energy, right? So it's like these technology programs just designed just to like feed off of that. But it's almost like, well, hey, meditating, that's what it does help. If you just spend a little bit more time in that gap, then instead of just moving on impulse to just go grab your phone, you may just go out of bed and stretch, right? Do some push-ups. Go to the gym instead of looking for that like immediate payoff. Having that delayed gratification, right? Like doing something in order to get something instead of just like, I need it right now.
It's funny you mentioned the gym, because you go in there and there's two distinct types of people in the gym, in my opinion. It's the people who are in there, I guess, to make themselves feel better, but you're, doing your thing and you're looking over at them and they're on their phone the whole time. And I would bet money that they're on social media. And then you have, the jocks, the bros who are taking pictures of themselves, posting it to the gram. So the way I personally use social media, I use it as a resource, as information, for the most part. I honestly don't care what somebody ate for breakfast yesterday morning. Like that, posting that on Facebook, I have no desire to engage in that type of content. Now, if you post it and say, hey, I lost 10 pounds on this, I feel great, you should check this out, you might catch my attention there. I am not a big poster of content myself, for whatever reason, but I do consume the content, definitely.
So I like the question you posed, Cal. Right, the fact that you asked a question, right? I think in this day and age, with all of this social media and stuff like that, where we're consuming content that feeds our biases and our worldview, we don't ask enough questions, but we make statements of opinion as if they're facts.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the fact that you asked the question of, should we be blaming the algorithm or the social media, the technology companies, because they are just tools, is a good question, right? So I'll run with that for a second, and I'll say, my opinion is, yeah, you're right. It is a tool, and because it's out in Wild Wild West, right, Pandora's box, it is feeding the best of society, right? I mean, you have people who are able to find long lost loved ones, people who are able to find organ donors, so on and so forth, through the medium, through the platform, and then it also feeds the worst of society.
Yeah, and then people could sell organs.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So then you got people selling organs and human trafficking and all of that jazz, right? So it is a tool, it is a platform, and you know, I lean towards the idea that the creator is responsible for its creation, right? So if the Google or the Facebook or the whomever of the world created this thing and we see some nefarious action happening with it, that it's a detriment to society based on social standards, right? No, not any one group, but overall groups standards of living. Then I think it's my
You
opinion is
know,
their responsibility to kind of take.
so here's a position I'll take, Ralph, because
Okay.
right now, you know what? I feel like I'm Mark Zuckerberg and you're like I'm on Capitol Hill, and you're saying that, okay, well, it's the technology companies, right? That y'all have to take some type of responsibility, which I get that, right? But if you look at society, what technology companies have shown to the politicians is a reflection of what they've done over years and years. I think society and technology is it's just showing them a reflection of what is really out there, right?
Yep.
In society. So these are things that, well, instead of just trying to cast the blame, it's like, how can we fix it? Right?
Oh, I agree, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's a yes and yeah, I
Yeah.
absolutely agree.
Mm-hmm.
Technology is a reflection of what we
Mm-hmm.
see in the world.
Yeah. Social media.
And
Mm-hmm.
the algorithm
Yeah.
feeds
Right.
one view.
You know
It's
what?
amplified.
Right.
It's kind of like when stuff was happening in the community, and like especially in the black community, everybody was blaming rap, everybody was blaming hip
Right.
hop,
Right.
people was blaming the artists
Or
for
the
all this
video
stuff.
games or all of
Right.
that stuff. Right.
Right. But the artists, they came up in those same environments, and they're just sharing you a picture of what they experienced, right?
Right.
And I look at technology, and as much as people may look at technology from a science aspect, which it is, I mean, it's a science, but it's also like an art. It's also a way that we express. These are things that we express in a computational, you know, algorithmic way, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, man. Hell yeah, I feel the tech company should take some responsibility for what they're doing. But it's not like to say one person needs a place to blame. I think it's like everybody is like a holistic way we have to look at it to like kind of solve that problem, instead of saying like,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a
So,
we thing.
Cal, you brought up some really good analogies with rap, hip hop music, and how the powers to be were trying to pin issues on, that societal issues. And then gaming, first person shooters, same thing. I remember Columbine clearly because it was the first mass shooting, if I'm not mistaken. And, as you dug deeper and deeper into that conversation, they started to try to blame it on the gaming companies and saying, oh, he's playing too much Doom, he's doing too much this. And you could draw that same comparison to now in the technology companies. So is it really the platform or the music or the gaming, or is it us? I think we're the problem, which goes back to the mental health aspect. Now, one thing we could do is when you see people going down these dark holes on these platforms, start providing content that will help them rather than perpetuate whatever issues they're dealing with psychologically. I think that's one solution right there.
Well, I like how you shifted that, Chris.
Yeah, because you could use technology to actually provide those signals, right? Because you could tell your friends if something is up with some of your friends, right? Because you have some friends that always posting like blah blah, this, doing that. But if you don't see anything for like a week or two, it's kind of like, wait, what's going on?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like what's happening? So yeah.
Overconsumption that deviated from their normal consumption of one thing, be it sugary foods or some conspiracy theory or whatever I might have you, maybe that is a trigger point to say, hey, look, how are you doing today?
I think again the problem becomes who makes the decision on where you draw that line. There's no governing body to decide when to flip the switch and say, okay, this person's had enough of this. It's time to offer them some help or pull the plug and no longer show that content to this individual.
And I think we were leading up to some tools earlier, right? Some solutions earlier. Cal was talking about, meditation and not consuming the content, right? Disconnecting, right? The the ultimate is disconnected from the source of the, albeit addiction at some point, right? And it's going and doing the meditation. It's going and having the conversation like this, with friends, real people in real world. It's about having the conversation with people that you don't necessarily agree with on all topics, right? Cal and I just had that type of discourse, right?
You did? What was the topic, bro? Not to.
We were just talking about it. I was coming from the angle of, look, I think social media or the technology companies are responsible. Cal came from a different angle and said, wait, we can't just put blame on them. We also have to look at it as this is a deep-rooted societal issue. We have to have a more holistic approach to it. I think that was the summary of our conversation right there. Right? And then from his conversation point, I said, oh, okay, well, yes, I agree with that. And, somebody has to take the charge, to your point, Chris. Somebody has to take the charge and kind of wrangle this problem together to kind of begin piecemealing this holistic solution that we need to put in place.
And let's be honest, the other side of that is it has to generate the same, if not more, revenue with that solution tied in. And I think that's where we run into the issue.
Oh, yeah.
Although we love to see this kumbaya moment where corporations and government entities are willing to take less of the pie for the betterment of all, I don't think that's reality.
So what's funny, man, is like I always think that it's like, what are we, and I know we probably not gonna be able to answer this in this session, right? But you almost think that, what are we avoiding when it comes to the ways we use social media, like in a negative way, right? Like, what are we avoiding? Is it an avoiding mechanism as far as like using that medium to avoid like what's really happening, avoid something like going on in your life? Is it a way to escape, right? Because it's funny because like I realized like in my life, right, like conversations that I need to have, like for example, today I had a call with with a customer, right? And initially when the customer came up, I laid out my agenda, like what I wanted to cover, blah blah blah. Initially, like the customer came back with some resistance, right? And typically, especially in my role, or even if you in like sales or if you have a business, like the customer is like always right. People always have that stuff. But no one really wants to lean into that tension and kind of like challenge that customer. And it's funny because there's a stat out there with like different types of the challenger sales method, right? People have like different types of salespeople, and the challenger is proven to be like the most effective way to work with customers, right? And it's almost like it's one thing I've been like super interested is where do you feel that tension, and then if you feel that tension, it feels like you onto something, like you gain somewhere, and it could be with like when we talk about mental health, some of the topics that we have in today are causing like a lot, and it seems like, and a lot of it happened on social media. Like if y'all remember Yahoo used to have comments. Remember the comments? They used to have the comments on Yahoo, but they got rid of it because there was so much freaking like trash that people were sharing on it. And it's funny because people just feel more liberated to just say whatever the hell they want to say
Oh yeah,
in freaking on social media.
because I ain't gotta look at you in your eyes, man.
Yep.
Right.
Right.
I ain't gotta connect with you at a human level. I could just say whatever I wanted to say, boom, and walk away, or scroll down to the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to get y'all's thoughts on social media as it pertains to your day-to-day 9 to 5. And if you think your company should have a say in what you can post privately on your private social media accounts, if it should be even monitored by them. And if so, again, what type of guidelines come along with that? Because I can tell you from at my company, when we are interviewing someone, you type their name into Google, all of a sudden their social media, social media, help me out here, profile pops up. Thank you. And you're like, oh, well, let me check out, and see what they do in their spare time. And then you look at it and you're like, oh, like he killed it in the interview, but he into some freaky stuff. Like, I don't know about this. So is that fair, one? Or is it like, hey, you posted it, you knew it was going to be public, and you take what comes with that?
That's a loaded question, Chris.
Ralph, I'll let you take that if you don't mind.
All right, I'll jump on it. Yeah, I'm all over the place on that. Right. So to your latter part, right, is it fair? Right. I think in this day and age, it's expected, right, that you have an online public presence, right? So therefore, you should have the expectation that if you're going to do anything, people are going to search for you and may find things that they're going to find things. So you want to make sure that they find things that reflects you well. From a company standpoint, right? I'm big about organizational cultures, right? So if I have a particular culture that I want to maintain and protect in my organization, I want to be able to attract people who are going to be able to fuel that culture, right? So if I see that you might be a hindrance to that culture, I don't want to bring you in and disrupt, right? Because the cost of disruption, if I'm going to look at it from a revenue standpoint, the cost of disruption of bringing you in and you causing havoc within my organization is something I'm not willing to bear. Both from a people aspect and certainly from a financial aspect. And then the third thing on it of your day-to-day, or the third thing I'm seeing from your question of the day-to-day of social media, for me that's pretty new, right? For most of my career, I never had access to my phone 9 to 5, right? So there was no way for me to be able to be on social media. Now, addicted to email, I was and I still am, right? I admit that. But so other social media platforms, I never had access to it. So I'm still new into kind of picking up the phone and kind of running with it, right? I do find myself on Instagram, early in the morning where I should have been stretching, as Cal said, or running, going to the gym.
Yeah, Ralph.
Like, hey, look, I'm speaking my truth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So a lot I threw in there because you had a lot in your question.
So, you know what? It's funny, right? Because I feel that perhaps before the pandemic, you could make an argument to say like, okay, what happens at work, and what happens at home stays at home. But with this new environment, I mean, it's kind of blended one and a two, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, right now I'm talking to you guys, but like I could get email and I'm, interacting with people from work and, you always on, right? So it's almost where like the whole work-life balance has just been completely redefined, right? But then yet you have like this medium, right? Because we're so committed and invested into the internet technology, where we have to kind of define like a way of privacy, like what part of my identity can I keep to the internet and have that where it's not conflicting with what happens on my 9 to 5, whatever a 9 to 5 is nowadays, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like that is evolving in itself. So that begs the question. I mean, is there some type of responsibility on the user to decide where to put that type of content? Like if they want to have content with a group of people that they feel comfortable with. That's why I feel that we're going to evolve. Well, we're already evolving to this virtual world, right? Because if you come up with a virtual world, a virtual identity, you think about like our identity right now, like technically your social media profile is a virtual identity. It's not like a real person. It's just a reflection of what you are. Because that whole, and people say it all the time, like y'all see this, like you'll see these women on social media taking pictures at these nice fancy beaches, restaurants, all of this, but you don't know what they went through to get there. You know what I mean? Like to do what they do. Like some even people who's saying like, yeah, I got all this money, I got this. Like you don't know what they did. It's just a reflection of something that they try and pitch to you.
Right.
You know? So is almost like, and I mean, I go in like on a whole tangent with like NFTs and this whole virtual world, virtual reality, but it's almost like, well, yeah, you could create your own identity out there and just become something that people ain't necessarily going to tie you to, so they could judge you in like your day-to-day, like your job,
Yeah. And I can understand how that could be good for, self-esteem and everything like that. But it's such a small microcosm of what's happening in people's actual lives day to day. And people tend to only post the good and highlight the good, which is understandable. But to your point, Cal, you don't know what's happening with that person behind the scenes. That car that they're driving in, they could have rented it off of a platform for an hour just to post that content. But I want to draw it back to the corporations and personal content. And I'll give you all a real life example. Paul Pierce, former NBA player, all-star, was a commentator on ESPN who was recently fired because he got off his 9 to 5, went to his house or his friend's house, threw a party, had some strippers at the party. They started turning up. I haven't seen the video personally, but it cost him his job. And I'm curious to hear y'all's opinion on that, if you think it's valid that he lost his job due to posting that type of content outside of the workplace. Now, ESPN, global brand, they have to protect that brand.
So so I tell you this, right? I like a decision like that, right? Like if you look at it like morally, like, okay, sure, should a man be able to keep his job? It's two different things, right? Because it's like, yeah, well, that's his personal life. He should be able to do whatever he want to do and share whatever content he want to share. But you got to look at it from another angle. I don't know what business agreement, I don't know what's in his contract, right? with ESPN as far as how he conducts himself, because he is a personality for them. And he does, as Ralph says, he is a part of that brand, Disney brand, right?
Yeah.
So
you don't mess with Disney, man.
Yeah. So I think, and it kind of goes back to what you said, Chris, as far as like, well, if it's an agreement or some type of contract that you have with employees about social media, like I feel like companies should be a little bit upfront of these things. I don't know how they could be more upfront in the recruiting phase, but at least once you become an employee, the guidelines of how you conduct yourself as an employee, right? So if you see some questionable kind about somebody before they even become an employee, at your job, at your company, then yeah, I could see where you want to use that against them. But if you feel like they fit the skills, they have the skills and they have the capabilities to do well at your job, I think you let them know what you're looking for, and if there's a fit, then you bring them on, and you let them know, hey, this is the penalty of you continuing doing, your freaky shit on whatever so on so platform, right? So
and it's to that point, right? So I haven't come across a company that doesn't have some type of clause about you are an employee of this company, and therefore you represent the company in some way, shape, or form. Be careful what you post on social media. Do not speak for the company, and what you post on social media could potentially have implications for your employment. You know what I mean? They may not say that, to your point, Cal, as clearly on that, but in my experience, they certainly share it, and it's something to be cautious of. When you on a social media platform.
So I guess it's not a question of whether it's wrong or right. It just is. And you have to, as that employee, decide whether or not you want to be employed by that company or go off and do your freaky shit on the social media platforms.
Right. Or find a company that is okay with you doing your freaky shit. You know what I mean? I think, again, to Cal's point, this should be more explicit in the hiring, and certainly revisiting it annually or whatever the appropriate cadence is. And it's as when you go for employment, you become a asset of that organization, right? And that organization has some level of control over you, albeit one would like to think that there is separation between work and life, but like we described earlier, that there's certainly less so because of the pandemic, and we're experiencing that. But as an entity to which you are an asset of, and you have signed the documents to say, I agree to, that's then legal has the ability to say, look, you said you won't and you did, so now, brum.
Where's the sense of freedom in that, right?
It almost makes me want to vomit hearing that.
Yeah, it sounds like you're a slave to the organization,
Right.
Because you want to give them a sense of individuality. But then there's another flip side to it, like, okay, well, you are part of a team, so you are part of an organization. So yeah, it's up to you, right? It's a choice.
Right.
Whether you want to agree to the terms to be part of that organization, right? So.
And so we were talking about privacy earlier, right? There is not enough, barely any laws around privacy, data privacy, certainly in this digital age, right? Especially in the Americas. In Europe, they have GDPR.
Yeah, they got a standard of it.
They have a strong standard on how you use data, how is it shared, so on and so forth, which limits the ability for all of this exchange and certainly exposure. And we just don't have that in the US. So to the point of privacy, we certainly, it's something that needs to be explored more.
Well, and it's unfortunate, the whole corporation side of things, because I think that does limit that corporations, as much as they say they want you to be your true authentic self, some people can't be their true authentic self even outside of work, right, for fear of losing their job.
Right. Ooh, that's good, Chris.
You know what? I got a topic for us next session. We talking about true authentic self. I believe we mentioned this already on one of our talks. Code switching.
Yeah.
And that's that's where I was going with that, Kyle. You hit the nail on the head right there, for sure.
Ooh, I want to dig in. I still want to dig into that right now, but that's a whole. That's. Whew.
Yeah.
And we've already just proven that it not only affects your work life, but it affects your personal life as well.
Oh, wholeheartedly, right? And, and again, mental health, right? And if I cannot be my most authentic self, I am hiding some aspect of who I am. Um, Therefore, I create conditions of isolation. I create conditions of depression. I create conditions of anxiety because I have to, put on this mask for this period of time, and I can't be fully expressive.
Yeah, yeah. And I know I'm always looking for a solution, but I don't see a solution for that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I mean, yeah, like, is there right? And that's the struggle though. That's the struggles because you always like naturally, especially how my mind works, is like you want to find a solution, right?
right,
You want to figure it out. You
right.
know, is there something to figure out when it comes to like? I mean, Ralph, you bring up a good point, right? Like we all have different type of masks. We all have different types of roles. And this is one thing I even have to like observed in my line of work, right? Because like there's certain people, and this is one thing that actually this is actually what helped me with working with like different types of organizations, different people, is because like so often we get tied up with these titles, right? The title, oh, I got a meeting with the CEO, oh, I got a meeting with CIO, oh, this, and that person, right? Which it almost, you look at even like some of the terms people say, like, yeah, I'm a B2B company, I'm a B2C company. But it's funny, I saw this one thing was like, what happened to H, human to human, right?
Hmm.
When you drop the titles and you start talking to somebody you, like a human being, like for example, like I don't know if y'all ever heard about this, but it's called transactional analysis. I learned it in the Sandler method. So transactional analysis is where you have three different modes that people typically communicate with each other. You have the child, you have the adult, you have the parent.
Hmm.
So the parent constantly is trying to dictate, like, hey, no, like authoritative, telling people like, hey, you don't do that, or you don't do this. The adult is the reasonable type of person. Well, hey, let's talk like adults, like have a conversation, like let's see. And then the child is the one that's complaining, try to place blame. And we've all played these different roles at some point in our lives. I mean, y'all playing the parent role, of course, because y'all have kids and you play the adult. But we've all been the child,
Right.
right? We all
I
played
was
that
a
role,
child I played that role when I was a child.
right?
I think I've grown out of it since then. I may slip into it every once
And
in a
you
while.
say that, but it's funny how adults slip into it unconsciously.
Oh yeah, easily.
Hmm.
Especially when we
Yep,
don't get
Hmm.
our way. Let's be real, man.
yep,
Yeah.
yep. Yeah, depending on what social setting you in, right? Because certain settings, you may be the leader, right? You may be the boss, right? But if you hop on a plane, who's the boss now?
Yeah, the pilot.
The pilot,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, they own that. I
You
ain't trying
know,
to take that,
Yeah.
right?
right?
And
It's
so to
it's
your
like,
point, right,
yeah,
the title is so tied to our identity,
yep.
right? That to lose it loses pieces of our identity. And then the question becomes, what kind of mask am I wearing now?
About to tie it into something else.
Ooh, bring it.
So you know what's crazy? What if somebody actually said? I think it was like Snoop. Like, imagine if all of those freaking Instagram models lost Instagram. What would happen to their identity then?
Yeah.
What if all their followers disappeared? What if the whole thing just crashed and just boom, like new platform, no platform?
I
Then
would,
they'll just be the next chick next door.
Well,
yeah.
because it's so tied to their identity. Like it's wild. Because I mean, you look at some people like you might be walking with them like side by side today and be like, yeah, okay, a regular person. But like on freaking Instagram, they probably have like 1 million followers, and you're like, wait a minute, okay, well, damn, I didn't know I was rocking next to Ralph Plaskett.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Now you know.
right?
Yeah, it's crazy how social media has, created conditions of celebrities like that, right? And then how that celebrity status associates with our identity, and then to lose that, how that would destroy our self-image.
And I like the human to human comparison that, or example that you gave, Kyle, because those celebrities on their pants one leg at a time, just like everybody else. And whenever there's some type of scandal or something associated with those celebrities, you realize that all that glimmers is not gold. Like, again, they have this platform that they are projecting the best version of themselves. And in some cases, not even necessarily the best version of themselves, the version that attracts the most followers, regardless of what version of themselves that is. And people get drawn to that and they start to idolize that because that's what they've been dreaming of trying to achieve. Little do they know that that person behind the scenes, and we talked about this a little bit last time, is a wreck. I mean, that is the best part of their day. They have nothing else to look forward to. And if you take that away from them, i.e., the Instagram models take away Instagram, they really are left with nothing unless they go over to OnlyFans or something like that.
I like how you said, I like the segue to OnlyFans, and I'm gonna go back to what you said about idolize, because I wonder if it's more culture driven with the whole idol, putting people, yeah. And I wonder if that's something. I wonder if that's an opportunity we have to we can innovate. We could change that.
So I think we're certainly talking from a perspective of woke folks, right? We have this awareness, right? But then you have a segment that's not aware. And how do they interact to all of this?
Or maybe they're aware of, real quick, or maybe they're aware and they're just using it to their advantage.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe, right? Yeah. So, but then we could also certainly say that there are folks who are not aware. The ones who are coming to mind for me are, the 13-year-olds, like you were talking about earlier, Chris. Those younger ones who don't have the adult understanding of all of this, and that's all they've grown up to only know this, and to go on social media and see the perfectionism of all of the things that they're scrolling and following, and the implications of that on their psyche.
I wonder what the data is around social media in general and the connection to mental health issues. I think it's fairly certain that it can perpetuate mental health issues, but can it cause mental health issues, for one? Or are people drawn to social media because they already have some type of mental disorder, or both? And is it just cyclical?
You say drawn as if there's an option these days. You know what I mean? What was it? Miramar. No, is it Miramar? I think it's Miramar. Apologize. I'll confirm it.
No, you're right.
When you buy your cell phone, it comes preloaded with Facebook. Right? That's the way that they're able to communicate within their country boundaries, and as we've seen in the tragedy, perpetuate a line of thinking that has caused violence to a group of people. We're in a society today where social media isn't again, we're from a little bit older generation, so we can see a time when it didn't exist. But there's so many people who doesn't have that experience. They only know this. You know what I mean?
It is.
Think about a time before you had a computer. You can't really think about it because we've all had an experience with computer. 56K dial-up maybe, but we all had an experience with computer, right? We can't really think back at a time we really had a typewriter or anything, whatever was before a computer. That's all we know in our generation.
I got one better. Think of someone that you know that doesn't have social media profile. I can think of 0 people that I know.
Yeah, people even making it for their kids.
Right. Their pets.
For their pets,
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
But what were you saying, Kyle? My fault.
No, I was wondering, like, you know, is the question really, because like when I see people talk about social media, the way we talking about it, you know, it's almost where, you know, they look at ways for like, okay, so if social media is a bad thing, like how do we just get rid of it, or do we just go anti-social media? And it's almost like, okay, well, if you remove social media, then obviously something's going to take its place, right? So what do you replace it with? So then that's when I almost think like, okay, well, how could we make it serve us instead of us serving it? You know?
That's a powerful distinction.
That's a real good question too.
So I'll go back to your analogy earlier, Cal, about guns. Right? You said we were talking about social media being a tool, and you said guns. That argument has always been the place, right? Yeah. The term of responsible gun use and ownership, right, as opposed to irresponsible, and we've seen what irresponsible has been able to do. So I'll tie that to social media. What is responsible social media usage, right? What is a healthy, you know, I'll put bunny quotes around it. What is the healthy social media engagement and usage and blah, 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 blah.
That's right. Do we need to start coaching people on how to, you know, best practices around using it? And I don't know if you can do that, because like we're using it at such young ages now. And I think perhaps it may have to start at home with parents. Like, when do you allow, you know, your kids to use it? And then so I mean, that's the kids part of it, but then you think about adults, right, too. When adults engage with it, you know, how could we use it in a way that actually like is you know, benefits? And then the next thing too is like benefits, like how do you define all of that stuff, right? So it's very like it's complex, man. It's complex.
Huge. But to your point earlier, right? So I'm going to keep on jumping on this, right? So to your point earlier, is a holistic issue, right? I think you're going to see people who run the gambit of this medium and an addiction source, right? And we're all addicted to it in some capacity, right? We've been saying social media, but let's talk, if we expand a little bit more broadly, technology, right? Email is as much of an addicted source that as Facebook or what have you. People are going to run the gambit, and we're going to have to throw all type of mental health resources at them in order to support them wherever they are in the stage, right? Some people might just need a coach and to be able to, you know, open up possibilities for how they can detach, right? But other people might need psychotherapy, right? To be able to, you know, sit down and really break this addiction, you know, it's 12-step program or whatever the case may be for the social media effect. To the whole point of this forum, right? I think we need to have this conversation so we can destigmatize, bring awareness and destigmatize the effects of what social media has brought to individuals, so that they are willing to come to the table and say, hey, look, I think I might need some help around this, and, you know, reach out to the appropriate resources that could provide them that help.
All right, well, let's go ahead and wrap it up, gents. Any final thoughts on the topic of social media?
Yeah, so I think, you know, the social media effect, you know, I think if we can monitor ourselves and say, okay, well, am I, you know, let's just assume you have an addiction. What am I addicted to, and how much have I committed myself to this social media? And then kind of figure out ways to kind of curtail that back. Would be my suggestion around some of the challenges we've discussed around the social media effect.
I think this conversation of social media open up like another conversation we have to explore, like identity, right? Because like there's an identity that we have with our friends at work, and this identity we have on social media, right? So it's almost like, how tied, like that separation, right? And it's funny because in meditation, it actually shows you like at times to have that separation from like, there's one you, like there's you, and then there's and then there's you get into that I am, I amness, like the I am, like people I am, and then they tie themselves to something else, which is I am Calvin Pinney, I am a basketball player, I am whatever it is, right? So yeah, man, I think on the topic of social media, man, is just don't be doing no freaky shit out there and getting caught at work.
Cal, you
that
always
only
come with it, man.
yeah, man, that OnlyFans, man, is only for a time. Don't think that's gonna be your life. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Ain't nobody 60 and over on OnlyFans, that's for sure. I would imagine. I don't know, I just want to put that out there.
Hey, they got content for everybody. So.
My final thoughts on social media is really to the content providers is just remember that, you not only are publishing your content for yourself, but you're publishing it for others. And you don't necessarily know who's going to be consuming that content. So I think you have a social responsibility to try and keep it, positive, try to keep it above board. And that's going to mean different things to different people. But I think just driving that awareness and getting people to stop and think before they post is really important.
Love it.
All right, y'all. We'll see you next time.